Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Super excited to be with you tonight. Hey Fiona, how's it going? Um, I'm really excited about this event. This is a bit of a smaller group than a lot of the other events that I tend to host, and so like I would say for anyone who's comfortable, if you want to, kick on your video, um, I think this can be like a little bit of a less formal session because it's a pretty small group. We only have, 30 folks on the call, and so like my goal is to make this as interactive as possible. You all can ask questions, um, and I really want to make this as valuable for you as possible. So. Um, it's really up to you. The more you engage, the more you can get out of it. So that's my pitch at the beginning here. So I'll just dive in. I think we still have a few folks trickling in, but I'll dive in to get us started. Um, so here's a slide that talks a little bit about me. So my name is Timothy. Um, I started my career at Goldman Sachs, spent 4 years there, and then got my MBA at Chicago Booth. And while I was at Booth, I was an admissions fellow. So very heavily involved in the admissions process there. Really enjoy like this application journey. And so I started doing consulting shortly after I graduated, and have done consulting, admissions consulting for about half a decade now. uh, I spent 4 years at Boston Consulting Group, and just recently left BCG. I now work at a company called Lennox, and lead the corporate initiatives. I'm on the corporate initiatives team, leading our AI strategy as well as some M&A work. So that's a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I've been doing consulting now for several years and have done, all the full-time cycles, all the deferred admit cycles, and recently tallied, I've helped over 100 folks get admitted to M7 schools. So definitely very experienced, particularly with the M7 space. So the point of this session is to talk about 10 tips to land multiple M7 invites. So that's, I think, hopefully the goal of a lot of folks on the call here. And I've put together some like must-haves, just like really basic things um, to help you stand out in your application. So with that, let's jump into it. So I'm just going to share the list sort of one by one, and then happy to take questions along the way. So the first thing that is essential is really to have like depth in your overall narrative. So the question here is like, how do you make your story authentic and unique to you? And I have spent a ton of time working with consultants while I was at BCG. I helped a lot of BCG consultants with their admissions journey. And one big question I get all the time from clients that are consultants is like, hey, there's a million, MBB or other consultants applying to all these same schools. So how do I stand out? And so here's a few tips for you to think about, right? One is to highlight unique times in your life when you've been challenged or times where you've had significant growth. This could be career growth, but it could also be like just personal milestones or sort of defining moments in your life. Um, and then last would be, how you can share your authentic voice in these experiences to really bring them to life. So I'll give you some examples of like what this can look like, just to kind of help you think through it. So I had one applicant a year or so ago who shared an experience about how she was presenting in a large group at an investment bank and like looked up and saw all these really senior people and just like froze and basically started crying and walked out of the room like in the moment. And she talked about how kind of shaming and devastating that was. Um, but then she talked about how she like learned to sort of find her voice and what enabled her to speak in public settings, and how she like practiced and really worked on it. And then kind of by coincidence, a year later, she was in the same investment bank, in the same building, giving a different presentation for a completely different reason. Like it was like a class project, but she talked about how like therapeutic that experience was, and how that sort of journey helped her learn the importance of being authentic in her public speeches. One other example of a narrative that has depth and is truly unique and authentic is I had another client who wrote about her experience with bias and diversity throughout her life. And the opening experience she shared was like when she was a little girl, she was on a train with her family, and she watched this altercation between, one person like yelling at an immigrant family and telling them, to go back to their country of origin, and her dad stepped in and sort of defended this single mother with her kids, and kind of stood up for them. And she talked about being so proud of like her father in that moment, and how that was sort of a defining moment of like what it meant to be a part of her family, and like how important representation and sort of like looking out for minorities sort of became a part of her DNA. So it's really about like thinking about your own personal or professional evolution. So one of those maybe is more personal, one more professional, but hopefully gives you a sense of bringing some of this depth and authenticity to your narrative. Um, so that's the first point. Any thoughts on this from the group? Again, like this is a pretty small group, so feel free to just come off mute. You can ask questions if you've started thinking about your applications, wondering about stories that you have or experiences, or like really any questions. Like I want to make this as interactive and helpful to you all as possible. Or in the chat if you don't want to come off the mute, that's okay too. All right, we'll tick through a couple more. I've been told that I have to stick to the time tonight, so and I want to make sure we get through all of them. All right, so the next this maybe is one that you all would expect, right? Which is like academic aptitude and demonstrating intellectual curiosity. So the question I get around here all the time is like, okay, this is my GRE score, like is that good enough? Or I don't have the best GPA, and that's like a concern, right? And here what I would say, what I often tell clients is like, I think what's helpful to think about here is like, why do they care, right? Why are they asking you to take these exams and go through this painful process? And really what it comes down to is like, business school is super busy, when you're in the classroom and it's a super collaborative class, and you have to, make comments, are you going to be able to make comments or ask questions that are really engaging? And there's sort of an underlying like baseline assumption of your quantitative abilities or critical reasoning skills that the professors really just kind of assume you come into the classroom with, and so they want to test to make sure that you have those. And so I work with a lot of clients and have helped a lot of folks who have below average, and in some cases significantly below average test scores and GPA, and we've been able to work to get them admitted into top programs. And really, the trick here for anybody to think about, if you're feeling a little insecure maybe about your scores, I would say is to think about how you can demonstrate that same intellectual curiosity and that same sort of commitment to the academic rigor in other ways in your application. So it could be like doing some extra coursework, some pre-MBA courses. There's like the MBA math, a few different ways to kind of highlight your intellectual curiosity. I also advise a lot of clients, like part of how they assess this is actually like the quality and depth of ideas in your essays. And so, to the extent that you have more complex themes or different ideas that sort of blend together in a really beautiful way, that can show like a lot of intellectual curiosity, even like more on sort of the qualitative side, but is super important to them as well. The last point I wanted to make on the academic side is the admissions committees actually care about this particular component a lot less than potential applicants do. And I think part of this is because it's easy to sort of compare. Like I did this when I was applying, right? When took a GMAT, got a score, then I would go on GMAT Club and be like, okay, where am I going to get in with this score? What percent of people get in with this score? Like it's very measurable, and so it's easy to sort of like get a score, look at your undergrad GPA, say like how do I stack up against the rest of the folks. But the reality is, um, the admissions committee is they care about this stuff, and it's more of kind of a check the box thing. But beyond that, it's very important to sort of get all of the qualitative pieces right. What do I mean by that? Like the narrative, your career story. We're gonna talk about a lot of these, in the remaining 8 things. But I would say like once you sort of have these in a good spot, it's almost like a set it and forget it, and you can focus on some of candidly like the more important pieces of the application. All right. Saw a couple of questions come through in the chat. Do you recommend professional or personal stories or both? So, Maria, great question. I would say both. It depends on the school, candidly. So, like, Wharton's prompts are much more professionally focused, and I would say Columbia's are as well. Maybe, in some cases excluding the PPILSA. But like a GSB or a Booth, they explicitly have like a personal essay where they're expecting you to not talk about professional things, but more personal growth, leadership growth, like your own sort of development. So it depends a little bit on the school, but I would say like like you need to be thinking about both personal and professional, and kind of your own development across both of those and how you can represent those in the application. Does that help? All right. I'll assume. Okay, awesome, cool. Uh, all right. So I got one question from the group about how to present a unique story for someone who comes from an overrepresented population. Um, This is a common question I get with clients that I work with, probably because just by statistics, right, overrepresented people end up being most of the people who apply. Uh, but I would like, my answer to this question would be everyone has had a unique journey, and everyone has had sort of unique learnings. And I think it's important to highlight what aspects of your experience are unique, and what unique offering you bring to the program. Like part of what the committee is looking for is what can you contribute to the community, um, and how can you add a distinct perspective. And so, you know, I like the admissions committee is very aware of sort of trying to sort of combat stereotypes, and really look at people for who they are. And so I would challenge you to like do some reflection to sort of identify your unique experiences that you can highlight, that will bring a lot of richness to your application. All right, another question I got. If you have multiple or perhaps more than one defining moment, what's the best way to determine what will really uh, resonate with the admissions committee? This is a hard one to answer without sort of getting into the specifics, because um, it depends a lot on the rest of your profile. So what I would recommend is like thinking about, there's a set of things the admissions committee is looking for. And when I was in admissions, I signed a confidentiality agreement. When I was exposed to the list in detail. So I can't go into detail on it, but I'll say like some things that are clearly public, right? Of like leadership, teamwork, like I said, this academic aptitude, like sort of all these things. And so you can think about, what aspects of your background, like the way I would think about this is each of the components of the application. Like, what are your recommenders best positioned to speak to? What fits best on your resume? What will fit best in the particular essay prompts, and that will kind of help you identify like what are the themes that you really want to have come through in your essays, and then which stories best reinforce those themes. So it's more a question about application strategy in my mind. Hopefully that helps. All right, thoughts on taking random executive MBA courses. So Fiona, these do help. I think particularly if you again like have some concerns about your scores, um, or your GPA, I think you can use this as a way to sort of demonstrate your commitment to the program. They do help. Absolutely, especially if you can get a good score. So I do think it's a good part of of your strategy. Um, uh, all right. Thomas, your question: what are main differences that traditional versus non-traditional applicants should consider in structuring their applications, preparing for interviews? Um, there's not really a clear delineation between traditional and non-traditional, I would say. uh, the admissions committee is looking for the same set of things. And I would say to get specific on like where to, go deeper versus like more shallow, we would need to have like a conversation about your particular profile, unfortunately. But I guess to answer your question, they're sort of looking for the same things. Um, uh, Zoe, maybe you can reach out to me and we can chat through this. It doesn't put you at a disadvantage. It's more about how you position it. All right, I'm gonna keep going again, just to make sure we can kind of hit the 10 things. But then we can stop and take more questions too as we have time. All right, the third thing I really wanted to hit on is the leadership evolution. So you really need to show when it comes to leadership, what they're looking for is not just like student body president or like whatever kind of your sexy leadership thing is that you may or may not have. Really, it's about a trajectory, right? So they're looking for significant growth in your leadership exposure. Uh, and I would say part of this is like, what roles have you had? But part of it is also just like, what are some of the leadership skills that you've been exposed to? And a couple of big ones that I see in a lot of strong applicants is like adaptability, willingness to sort of make decisions. And then another really big one to think about is how to motivate um, people who you don't necessarily have direct influence over. So this is something that um, like is such a necessary skill in business, right? Um, and I work with all the time, even my current role. So I partner closely with several folks in the finance org and the company that I work for, including the CFO. And he and I will often talk about, or have often talked about, how we can influence people in different parts of the organization and the business, and to try to create collaborative outcomes. And so this is a skill that the CFO of the company that I work for is constantly using, and so it's so important to successful business career. And so it's thinking about how you can showcase the way you've inspired or guided others, particularly if you don't have direct oversight for them, right? It's always easy to sort of motivate somebody whose performance review you're writing, but it's sort of these informal leadership capacities that are really important, and then also showing that leadership trajectory or leadership growth that's super important. All right, next, somewhat relatedly, but also incredibly important, right, is teamwork. So you want to show awareness around the importance of diversity, how you collaborate. Uh, uh, it's helpful to have some awareness around the particular role that you play in a team. Where do you fit in best? Like, are you somebody that likes to inspire? Are you somebody that listens and sort of pulls out the voices that don't always get heard? Are you somebody that kind of asks questions to like fill in the white space, after or to challenge the sort of groupthink, in the room? So spending some time thinking about like, what is your natural value add to a team? This is super important in your admissions narrative, but it's like candidly, it's also going to be super important in business school, um, because teamwork is like it's like group work, and teamwork is super fundamental. Like basically every class has some group component, and so it'll be important to sort of think through some of this. Another big piece that I wouldn't underestimate is conflict resolution. Like like questions around conflict resolution come up oftentimes in the interview. and can also uh, show how you solved a problem or overcame a challenge. It's also something that recommenders oftentimes can speak to. So another kind of important piece to think about. All right, one more, and then we can pause for a break or any questions that you have. And this one is candidly, it's like one of the most important ones, right? Which is like a willingness to fail. Um, and the reason this is important is because it's easy to sort of look at somebody who's very accomplished, and feel like everything they touch just like works out, right? Everything they try, it always leads to a success, right? But the reality is, as I'm sure this isn't news to any of you, right, is like uh, people who are successful, oftentimes, when you sort of make an attempt to do something, uh, you fail twice before you succeed once, right? Um, and so, it's common. Like when I applied to business school, there were multiple schools that I was rejected from, and there were multiple schools that I was admitted into. Um, and that willingness to fail, sort of willingness to kind of get punched in the face and sort of get back up is really important. And so you want to showcase when you've made mistakes or when you've really, had challenging experiences and how you've been able to sort of bounce back from those and learn from them. A big part of this too is just a willingness to show a real growth mindset in your work. Um, and so it's, like sort of a perspective that any failure or any setback is more of an opportunity to learn and to become something different than like a reflection of who you are that sort of can't be fixed. And so, embracing feedback like this, one of the two main questions in the letters of recommendation is around a piece of feedback that you received. It's a great opportunity to highlight your resilience and your willingness to embrace personal growth, to graciously accept feedback and then to try to improve. So I can't stress this one enough. It's really, really important in your applications. All right, maybe I'll pause here. We can take a couple other questions from the group. Um, how far back should one go in terms of specific life experiences? I hope I'm going to say your name right. Is it Somia? Um, should one talk about high school and middle school? Great question. So I recommend you stop at college. So I wouldn't go. Well, it's actually interesting. So people will sometimes write about experiences in their childhood, which is appropriate, ironically. Like childhood is like a very kind of, those are like formative years. And so, like that experience I shared of that girl whose father sort of stood up for that mother, um, and how that sort of shaped the way she saw the world and the way she saw like what it meant to be a part of her family. Uh, that's appropriate. And then I would say like from college on, sort of appropriate. I would stay away from sort of that middle ground, uh, for experiences. Hopefully that helps. For a candidate who doesn't have long years of work experience, how to show leadership. W, great question. Um, you can show leadership in a lot of different ways, is what I would say. So part of this could be like university experiences that you've had. It could be extracurriculars in your community. Um, like I had a client a few months ago who like volunteered at a women's shelter and ultimately like was responsible for some of the finances and like took on some additional responsibilities at the women's shelter. Great way to kind of show leadership and a willingness to lean in and drive results. So it can come from a lot of different things than just like formal work experience is what I would say. Should a candidate with 2 years of work experience put high impact internships on their resume, talk about their experience in their essays? Um, I think it depends on your broader profile, Somia. But yeah, it's hard for me to answer this question without seeing your resume, to be honest. But you can message me and we can look at it together. Um, David, do schools track interests like they do for undergrad? Not really. Yeah, I wouldn't worry so much about like showing up to online info sessions and things to try to make them feel like you're interested. Though I will say there is an art to sort of convincing them that you're really interested in their program, and we're going to talk about that in a minute here. But I wouldn't worry about like checking the box for a certain number of events, if that makes sense. Um, do these prompts work the same for EMBAs compared to traditional MBAs? Elliot, they do. Yep, yep, yep. There's a few nuances for EMBAs, and again, like shoot me a message on Leland. I'm happy to talk through some of that with you. Um, Career ambitions to go into investment banking, for example, is it still advised to share an anecdote about how you failed to build a financial model? Olivia, great question. Yes, I would say it could still be appropriate. I mean, I think part of it is how you share it, and how you kind of talk through the learning. Um, but look, I can tell you that the admissions committee would not expect every person who goes into investment banking to have just naturally been able to build a model the first time they tried and everything worked flawlessly, right? That's sort of the definition of this embracing resilience that I'm talking about. Um, I mean, I started at BCG right after I graduated from Booth, right? And like I had never before business school, I had never even really built a slide. Um, because I was more in Excel and building models at Goldman. Um, so it's like they wouldn't expect you to have the toolkit necessarily up front. I think how you tell this is what will be really important, Olivia. So hopefully that's helpful. Um, should you share with Steve a set of stories? Fiona, you want to. So for reapplicants, I don't know how many we have on the call here, but I would say um, you want to think about what's different. How has your profile changed? And so I would recommend sort of tweaking the narrative uh, depending on sort of why you didn't get admitted. So if you like what I would say here is like probably what's helpful is to have somebody with some admissions experience to review your applications and sort of see why you weren't admitted. And then I think you could get some feedback on like where to uh, uh, tweak your narrative and where it makes sense to sort of keep things consistent between the two. Laura, how much at all, if at all, do admissions committees look at your LinkedIn profile, their social media? Not much, but I would say it's not unheard of. So I would definitely think of sort of like think about what you're showing on social media and LinkedIn. It's more common like as interviews come up if you're like interviewing with an alum or with a student. It's not uncommon for them to look you up before the interview. So I would definitely like be sort of mindful of what you're putting out into uh, the world of social media, before you apply. Um, I'm getting a question about whether it is appropriate to add part-time jobs during college to support the family on the resume. Um, I think this can be helpful context around your college experience. So you could talk about like, achieved X GPA while working X number of hours a week to support myself through school, something like that. I probably I wouldn't recommend putting part-time jobs like in your career section, but more as like a anecdote to give context for your university experience. All right, Sam, when working on stories and anecdotes for your narrative, what advice do you have on how to begin the brainstorming process, overcoming the initial writer's block? How to identify a story that's solid, worth speaking on? Sam, I'm so glad you asked this. This is like one of the harder parts of the process. And honestly, I think like one area where a coach can really help. So like what I typically do is just have a series of sort of brainstorming sessions with my clients where they will bring ideas and I will sort of push them on like what I think would resonate with the admissions committee and what wouldn't. Um, and then oftentimes we sort of brainstorm together how we could package different themes together to create like a more cohesive story. And then from there, I'll ask them to write an outline and we sort of evolve it from that. Um, I think if you wanted to do this on your own, I would say, like, I think there's some consulting websites out there. Uh, Honestly, like, there's a bunch of really good examples on Leland Plus, um, where you could go and read some example essays, and then I would read multiple. That's why, like, I think Leland Plus would be good. Is I would read multiple because that will help you um, start to see, like if you just read one, you're going to anchor on those themes. So if you read multiple, it will kind of help you start to see the differences, like what's different and what's consistent across each of them. All right, one last question, then we'll keep going. Are there parameters around using ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, for coming up with your essay stories, narratives? Like, would committees search to see how much you've molded your search results or something? So great question, Laura. Columbia Business School actually gave a statement about LLMs recently in the application process, and they said that it's appropriate for their applicants to use ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, all the things, to sort of help refine their essays. Um, but basically, like, if you use these tools to write your essays from the ground up, it will be pretty obvious and fall flat. And there's a good Leland article on that too that my colleague wrote. I think it's called, like, Why ChatGPT Can't Write Your MBA Essays or something. Um, and I've definitely seen essays that folks have written, using generative AI. And candidly, it's like it fails the very first point that I shared with you, which is like that authenticity um, piece, uh, and that's like super important. So I would say, like, for refining, for using diversity of vocabulary, for thinking about the best way to phrase it, it can be super helpful for that. But honestly, that's like the last 10%, if any, if even, of the work, to sort of nailing a really, really strong admissions essay. All right. Just wanted to take a quick break here and just put in a plug for, there's a opportunity to win free admission to our MBA application boot camp. So I don't know how many of you have seen this. It's starting this coming Monday. And it runs twice a week. And this uh, boot camp is packed with an insane amount of value. Honestly, I haven't seen anything quite like this before. So there's 8 sessions. I'm teaching the one on July 1st, the second one on the left, about how to write compelling M7 MBA essays. So there's a session specifically on GSB, Wharton, and HBS. And then I'm talking about, things to think about across those three, but also for the other four M7s, like how to write essays that will really resonate with the admissions committee. But this covers, like so many parts of the process, right? Letters of recommendation, the application strategy, crafting a powerful resume that's oriented toward the admissions committee, working through the interview. Members of the boot camp get a one mock interview as part of it as well. And then we have office hours and workshops for folks. I'm doing the office hours as well. So, tons of value through this boot camp for folks. Um, so in addition to the 10 hours of expert instruction, there's also a bunch of interactive activities that are built in. I mentioned the interview. There's one-on-one application planning. So we've talked about some of the planning already. You get access to Leland Plus through the entire thing, which has already come up in our conversation. Leland Plus has, like, templates for your resume, templates for your letters of recommendation, like multiple letters of recommendation packets. I have written, like, dozens, gosh, close to 100 videos, or recorded 100 videos for Leland Plus on tips for application, school specific content, how to answer why school for each of the schools. Like, there's so much packed into this. Um, so it's normally $1,200. We're doing this giveaway tonight, where if you can enter here, and we'll be selecting one winner who can join for free, and then everybody who isn't selected tonight, we're giving a $400 discount for other folks who want to sign up. And then the other thing that the team wanted me to mention too is you probably saw at the beginning, and then at the end, I'll have that code for if you're interested in working on a comprehensive package with me. Anyone who signs up tonight for a comprehensive admissions package also gets free admissions into this boot camp. So that's like a $1,200 value for anybody who's interested. If you're looking for a coach, if you want to jump on the phone tonight, like I'm available, and are interested in signing up, would love to work with you. So that's it on the boot camp. Super excited about that. So wanted to throw that out. All right, let's talk through the other five things that I have for you tonight. So now we're going to talk about speaking specifically to the program. Okay. So this is probably one of the bigger mistakes that I see when I have a decent number of folks that will reach out to me who either didn't use a coach or used a different coach in some cases, who got rejected, and they kind of want to see why. And one of the often reasons that I see is it feels a bit like a copy and paste from a different school or a different application. And I will say the admissions committees are incredibly good at sort of sniffing this out. So they have strategically written their essay prompts to be positioned differently from their peer schools. And they also know what in their program is sort of table stakes versus their peer schools versus what is truly differentiated. Um, and then they are reading your career narrative. And so they know which things you're going to cite, whether they actually would help you in your career or not. And so like my biggest pieces of advice to showcase like your genuine interest in this particular school, read the application prompts very carefully. They may seem similar. I promise you they're not. And little nuances in the prompt are actually really important to get right. Like you need to understand what they're asking, and you need to craft an essay that directly addresses their specific question. Okay. Next, like you need to understand their program culture. You need to understand like what's truly distinct. And by distinct, I mean not distinct in terms of like a top MBA, but distinct like what does Wharton have that Harvard doesn't, or what does Kellogg have that Booth doesn't, in sort of their program offering. And then as much as possible, like avoid generic statements. Like the example I'll give you that I see that kind of makes me cringe every time is when people talk about being excited for a particular school because they're excited about their negotiations class. And the reason it makes me cringe is because literally every top 25 business school has the exact same negotiations class, the exact same curriculum. And by the way, like every single admissions committee knows that, right? And so it's just like, it feels very much like something that could be copied and pasted to any school that you're applying to. And it's really important to demonstrate fits, right? Part of what they're looking for is like, who knows why they want to be here, like knows what we have to offer, and is genuinely excited about that. So this is another one that's just like super, super, super important. All right. We talked through this one, then maybe pause for some more questions. So here, you need to think about what your unique contribution is. So I also read a fair number of applications, or have over the last several years, around, everybody's focused on like why the MBA, the sort of problem statement of your career, why the school. Part of this, right, is just thinking about like, what do you bring that's unique, that would be valuable to them, right? This is like a business transaction, if you will, right? So you want to think about like, what industry experience do you have? Maybe you come from a consulting background. There's a joke in business school that everybody in business school is either running away from or running to consulting. So it's, if you're one of the ones that's like running away from it, you could talk about being able to help folks case, right? Some of your peers to land the offer, or help open some doors for them from a networking perspective. You may have a unique cultural background. You may have unique cultural experiences, even if it's in a country where a lot of folks apply to top business schools in the United States, or even globally, right? you may have worked on a very unique project. Maybe you've been involved in some volunteer initiative that has influenced your values, and you believe those distinct values could be, really valuable for the MBA community. So I would spend some time thinking about, what you bring that's unique and would be valuable to them. And I would make this like specific, like make it real, right? It shouldn't be like high level stuff. It should be like, look, I want to, you know, host sessions like on networking for consulting. I want to do cases for first year students, and like very specific things that you can offer to the community. All right, here I'm going to pause here for just a second. Somia, sorry, I answered the Fiona's reapplicant question. Tends to tally track the new applications. No, they don't tally or track new applications versus you're asking the content. No, no. So they will they will be aware of sort of your previous application. They're not like looking at sort of like one for one across both of them. So I would say like for reapplicants, what's really important is like uh, I think you need to get some awareness around why you didn't get in. And then I would think about how you have changed and what you can sort of pitch to them as like how you're coming back different the second time. And by the way, both for you and Fiona, like I would say MBA admissions like loves reapplicants. To my point about like resilience, it's very attractive to them to see somebody who's really committed to the program, even if they weren't admitted the first time. So like my biggest piece of advice would probably be like engage somebody, what I said to Fiona, engage somebody with some admissions experience to review your application and identify like the strengths and weaknesses in your previous profile. And then you can build a real strategy around how to get a different outcome the second time. Does evolution process differ a lot for people from consulting, banking background, people from engineering technical backgrounds? GPA, GMAT, evaluation, resume. Oh, does the evaluation process? No, no, it doesn't. No. Do the boot camp interviews and structure expire at some point? That's a good question, Laura. Do you know that, Amanda? Laura's asking if the boot camp interviews expire at some point.
Let me check with Nick and I can have an answer by the end of the call.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. What are the best resources, ways to research schools for essays other than website information? Great question, Nilu. So what I would say is Leland Plus, again, I have written guides on each of the top schools and like what makes them distinct, how to sell it. And you can basically pick from that based on uh your career narrative and like what you're sort of pitching to them. I give all this content to my clients as well. So that's another option if you're interested in partnering with somebody. Um, let's see how else. Visit the school, have calls with current students, go to their admissions events, ask the questions and the Q and A's that they host. Um, you can do a campus tour, like you can do one of their tours, sit in a class. They talk about a lot of their differentiators there. Um, yeah, that's probably where I would start all that stuff. All right, Ashley, is this advice applicable to JD MBA applicants? How do schools view joint degree applicants? Do they evaluate these applications with different criteria? That's a great question. MBA applications do need to be a little bit different. Um, I would say the MBA portion of it is quite similar though. So it's really like what you need to tack on for the JD piece of it. And I've done a lot of JD MBA, MD MBA joint degrees. So happy to chat offline about that too a little more, Ashley. Uh, Question about buying the guides individually, if not the boot camp. Yeah, you can. So, Akash, they're on Leland Plus, so that's like probably the easiest way to just buy them if you're not going to participate in the boot camp. All right, awesome. Let's see, we got one more. Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, of course. All right, let's press forward just a little bit more here. So now we're going to talk just double clicking on like why this school and why now. Okay. So Here's the trick to answer why the school and why now, which is like first you need to identify the problem statement of your career narrative. So the admissions committee will be asking themselves, could this person go and do what they're saying they want to do after the MBA? Could they just do it right now without the MBA? So you need to have some awareness around like what you need, right? Some sort of like problem statement of like this is why an MBA is sort of the right path to get me to these career aspirations. Then you want to have a really clear sort of story from your current career growth and the learnings and things you've achieved so far to what you will accomplish during the MBA, and then to like sort of your short-term goal, and then that short-term goal really needs to build to sort of the what I like to call what you want to be when you grow up, right? Sort of your long-term dream job. Um, and then when you're thinking about like once you sort of have clarity on those pieces, then the why this school and why now starts to fall into place. So on the why this school, what I would say is you need to show them how specific aspects of their program that again are sort of unique versus their peer schools will accelerate your path to their short and long-term goals. So to give you an example of what this could look like, right, is like, say I want to start um, entrepreneurship venture and I'm applying to Booth, I could talk about the New Venture Challenge and that I've spoken to students who went through the New Venture Challenge and they got maybe they won, got some funding, maybe they didn't win, but they built a pitch deck that they were then able to use to secure funding elsewhere. So it's about sort of like tying, here's the problem statement, here's what I need from an MBA, and then here are the specific things about your school that tie or fit nicely with those, and trying to make that as real for them as possible. I think the why now is also an important consideration. Like you need to make a case for why this is like the right time for you um, to be getting the MBA versus 2 years before or 2 years after. All right. And then demonstrating the school fit, right? Um, and this one is super important. It's about like sort of showing belonging, right? Um, so this comes down to aligning with the culture, which, as I mentioned, like talking to current students, understanding what their distinct culture looks like, right? So, like for an example, Yale is very, very proud of their mission statement, right, of educating leaders for business and society. And so you would want to demonstrate awareness of that mission statement and how that sort of flows through to all the different aspects of their program. They're not just focused on sort of like growing, powerful business leaders, but also business leaders who are thoughtful about how they impact the broader societal outcomes. You want to highlight some campus involvement, as I mentioned, right? Research student clubs, find your fit, find clubs that you would be interested in, speak to the leaders of those clubs. Like you can schedule one-on-ones. You want to talk about how you see yourself really integrating in. And I would say do this homework early so that you can find the programs that you're, really most passionate about. Because that enthusiasm and that passion will come off the page. Like you would be surprised how much you can sort of tell how to the extent to which somebody's really excited about a program and its unique offering versus just trying to do 30 minutes or an hour of like online research and then spit some things on a page based on what it says on their website or things that they read on a blog or something like that. So some of this gets pretty anecdotal. I've had clients who have taught me uh, things about Chicago Boost program that I didn't know, despite the fact that I got an MBA there. Um, I'm not saying you have to have those level of like specificity in your anecdotes, but I think being really thoughtful about like what is it about this program that's unique and that I'm really excited about, and then how does that fit into my broader career narrative and my broader story? Like the more genuine and authentic that can feel, the more likely you are to at least check this box of sort of showing that you belong in the community. All right, last but not least, I just want to hit on this and like I know that this probably may seem annoying to some, but I will tell you, I just can't like this is so important, right? Once you sort of have the application drafted, you have to have error-free presentation. Um, I can't tell you it's when I review applications from folks who didn't get admitted, and they're asking me why. Oftentimes, I can just like circle multiple errors in their application, and you would say like, why does this matter? And the reason why is because it's an easy way to sort of communicate that you're actually not that interested, right? And so their tolerance for grammar errors, miscapitalized letters, a misplaced comma, again, like essays where the ideas are not that thoughtful actually, or feel pretty generic. Um, their tolerance for that kind of content is quite low. And so they're looking for folks where it feels very genuine, it feels very authentic, the narrative feels very tight. Every sentence is purposeful, um, and communicates a really like a set of thoughtful ideas, where they feel like they're getting to know you. They remember the narrative 24 hours later. It's sort of all of those pieces. That's honestly, it's my favorite part of the application because it's sort of this creative side that really needs to come through. Um, but I would go through it multiple times, have other people go through it who are further away from it, because you may like after you've sort of read the content enough, like you could sort of be blind to like errors that are there, right? And so it's helpful to just get different perspectives to make sure it's really tight and flawless. Um, all right, Amanda, do we have a giveaway winner here? Let's see, maybe you might have messaged me. Oh yeah, Stephanie Gann. You have won a seat at the NBA boot camp. So congratulations. That's awesome. I'm super excited. Very excited to be a part of it. There's going to be so much value there for any folks who entered but didn't win. Again, you can get $400 off, or if you're interested in working together, that is another way to just get in for free and save the 1,200 bucks. Awesome. All right. I think with that, we have a few minutes left here, so I can take a few more questions. Um, so let me see what we have in the chat, and then we can. Uh, let's see. Thank you for incredible insights. Two more questions. Some M7 skills don't specify a minimum work requirement. DB skills tend to extend. 1 year experience is pretty low, is what I would say. um, they like to see 3 to 5. I think if you have like two, we could build a case for why that's sufficient, and sort of again, like the test scores, like they're not asking for 3 to 5 just to ask for it. There's like a set of things that like there's rationale behind why they're looking for the career experience. So I think it's like highlighting that you've achieved those learnings at an accelerated pace would be the way to overcome that. Someone with a background as a non-funded startup founder. So I would say like partners, advisors, people on the board, like ideally like people on your board would be a great pick for letters of recommendation. Happy to also chat through that more offline if it would be helpful too. All right, Laura, building off the previous question, would an LOR be valuable if it's from my mentor who's a VP of my company, even though I don't directly report to him? I'm in sales and he's in user experience. So Laura, it really depends on like how close he's been to your work, right? For recommenders, you want people who are can intimately speak to sort of like the work that you have done. And we'll be able to kind of pull really, really robust examples that tie to their questions. Um, so that's happy to brainstorm on some of that too if it's helpful to you. How do you recommend to get inspired to write creative and memorable essays? Maria, this is like I mean I can't stress this enough, right? When I applied, like I used an admissions consultant, and honestly, it's just helpful to have a thought partner who can sort of pressure test the ideas. and help infuse creativity. So you have somebody on the outside who's very familiar with the admissions process, what the committee is looking for, and can help spark some of those ideas. It's a process that's very difficult to sort of do by yourself when you're sitting in front of a computer trying to write creatively. Like, how do you do that, right? And so I think part of this is it is an iterative process where it's like, you share some of your experiences, you brainstorm together. um, they can help push you to thinking, they can flag things specifically that would be attractive to the admissions committee. All of those pieces are really that's really like the path to get there. GMAT scores are good for 5 years. Um, do your experience count? Tell me the time you start the program. Do internships count? Um, it's a rough number, right? But I would say uh, they will likely just count it from like when they're sort of reviewing the application. So I would think about it more from like the time you apply versus like when you start the program. Um, Nadim, internships can count depending on the internship and sort of what experience you had, for sure, for sure. Um, any other questions? We have 2 minutes left. Y'all can come off mute too if you have any final thoughts. Look, I think my final tips would be think about the application components as a holistic profile. Like, don't just take them sort of one at a time. Think about your overall strategy, right? And the overall narrative that you're sharing, and how different pieces of that strategy sort of fit into each of the different application components. Um, and you sort of need to operate at like two different levels. Uh, so like a macro sort of view, strategic view, but then also being able to get really tactical and specific with each of the different pieces. Um, so that's it for me. Thanks everyone for joining. Reach out if you have any other questions. You have the QR here to my profile. Happy to chat more. Anyone who's interested in partnering together, I'm offering this $400 off, as well as you would get the admission into the boot camp tonight, if that's of interest to you. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Sam, Olivia. Have a great evening.